You ask anyone from an inner city, black or brown community, their sentiments of the local police, FBI, DEA, or any type of law enforcement, and this is probably the response that you will get.
Check this shit, you better watch your back. These people don't love us, homie, they only out to check. Look how they ride up the block, super hot. One of the homies got shot, and I bet it was a cop. I bet it was a cop.
But what if I told you it was a different side, a good and bad side, a right and wrong side, a side that took up on a badge and took up on a responsibility because they want to protect the communities, protect their families, and protect the citizens of the United States.
Best police department in the state of Texas.
But sometimes the weight of the badge becomes a burden to
The job
carry.
of law enforcement has always been a stressful one. Difficult circumstances are part of the profession. Yet the shooting at New Hope City Hall calls attention to the unpredictable nature of the job.
It's the idea and the fact that one never really knows from where and when the danger may come.
Licensed psychologist Dr. Michael Keller knows well the stress of police work. A police officer himself for 15 years, Keller now counsels hundreds of officers.
Regardless of the size of the city, regardless of the size of the agency, it seems like law enforcement is under greater stress. Many officers report to me feeling that they're under siege.
Keller believes the New Hope City Hall incident highlights the greatest stress of all for police, the unpredictability of the job, and the idea that an officer never knows when and where danger might appear.
Being in a constant state of activation, always being on alert, always being aware that danger lurks from any possible direction, from any possible person, is extremely stressful. It invades their personal life, their professional life.
That ongoing stress makes the need for resiliency training and learning techniques to cope all the more important during an officer's career.
Learning how to acquire and sustain a healthy lifestyle with regard to nutrition, sleep, relationships, and keeping things in perspective, yet still recognizing that the work of law enforcement is extremely dangerous, it's always uncertain, and not always necessarily well rewarded.
After a traumatic event such as the New Hope case, Dr. Keller says there's typically a debrief with officers and counseling staff to process the experience and try to moderate the acute stress that happens as a result of the incident.
Yet these great men and women still put their life on the line on a daily basis. Some are even going the extra mile to try to bridge the gap with the communities. Let's go back to a couple of years ago when I had the opportunity to interview my first police officer, and he went in grave detail about the problems of the community. Here with a retired Texas police officer, and I just have a few questions. So especially here in our Black and Hispanic communities in Texas, can you tell me what the code of silence mean?
Well, yeah, I don't just come from law enforcement. I grew up in the neighborhood, and so it was even strong when I grew up. Is the sense that you do not give information on somebody in the neighborhood, regardless of how heinous of a crime they did. Like, for example, this last weekend, killing 6 people and shooting numerous others. You know, at times there's really strong influences not to give information on other people in your neighborhood. And what's interesting is people often do if there's incentives, lesser sentence on their crime or funding from the government to pay people to talk. But it's legitimate in neighborhoods that it's reinforced by influences in the neighborhood like violence. If you are seen giving information to the police department, there could be violence upon you or your family or something like that. But we really need to have it mean that when you are protecting your neighborhood, that's protecting your neighborhood against all threats. So if somebody is killed in your neighborhood, that's not good for you or your neighborhood. So providing information, but in a manner that will keep you safe, is really critical.
So I was speaking to Congressman Manning, and what he said was he think we need to bridge the gap between the policemen and the communities again. So he was telling me about his days of growing up, and he knew every police officer by name. And even though he grew up in a racist era, he knew the white cops and the black cops. And if anything went on in the neighborhood, everyone pulled together. And when they didn't tell on you, it's usually because you already got a beating from 12 other parents. But so my next question to you is, how do you think, being a retired officer, that we can make those things happen? Like, how can we build trust again between the police officers and the community, so that the black and brown people in general don't think that it's a setup, or that we're wasting our breath, and that we're only going to be on the criminal side and not the side of right, and the police are there to help us and not just hurt us.
Well, I think you've seen throughout time that certain people in law enforcement have a tremendous amount of trust in our neighborhood. So, for example, if you go to the community and you say, do you trust Officer Johnson, for example? They might say, yes, I love Officer Johnson. I trust him with my life. But then if you ask them that same person, do you trust the police department that Officer Johnson works with, those same people will say no. So we have to take that same concept and ask yourself, why do they trust Officer Johnson? And most likely it's because they have a history with Officer Johnson. They've gone through some things, they've known him or her over time, and they've experienced some stuff. And Officer Johnson has stayed true to, he has a job to do, but he has built a level of trust with people where they can see his heart is true and all those sort of things. So we have to carry that same kind of thinking over to the organization as a whole. So if somebody is wearing that patch, they automatically trust you. You have to lose that trust for them not to trust you. And so that's going to take a lot of work, because there's a lot of history behind law enforcement and community. And we have to actually start working on that. We can't just go, we had a crime yesterday, we need to solve this, without the long-term approach to how do we build these relationships, build a better trust. So these beliefs of snitching and not snitching are never able to take root the way they have, because there's too much trust built up.
Okay, so I run a nonprofit organization, Trinity team, right? And I'm always speaking to the youth. What I get in return is they're scared of retaliation if they do pick up the phone and call. So can you assure them peace, or how would you go about talking to someone who says that they're afraid of repercussions if they pick up the telephone?
Yeah, I would say the first thing is, if there's somebody you trust, whether it's in law enforcement or anywhere else, that you can give the information to, that would probably make you feel much safer. I have, over my career, I've had many people call me and go, look, you didn't hear from me, but here's some information. And a lot of times we have a little bit of information that we might not think is very significant, and it might be the one piece that will lead us to everything else. So I'd say first, if there is an individual that you trust, provide that information to that individual. But there's other ways you can do it where you remain anonymous, so law enforcement doesn't even know who gave them the information. So if you are concerned, which some people are, that I know law enforcement says they'll keep it confidential, but I don't necessarily trust that, because I have a lot to lose if they don't. Well, you can provide information and law enforcement doesn't even know who you are.
Since then, have had the privilege to watch my brother graduate from the police academy, run for justice, pun intended, by the way, and watch him get married and develop into the full man of God that I knew he was, is, and will always be since day one. I give you Officer Christian Officer G.
Frederick Douglass said it's easier to rebuild strong children than to rebuild broken men. So with Trinity team, we're going back to the future, and I'm gonna build on that little boy that's inside of me and make him strong so we can help the future. But all 2023 know that Trinity team here to make a movement. Let's go back to the future.
For the love of me, it's the root of all evil. To get me in abundance, some will shoot their own people. old and young alike. That's why we loot and sell diesel. Cause when that status change, you can tell it by ego. They say the green body can loosen the still walk, face full of dead men, but damn it, they still talk. In a simple speech spoke, get a printed tea soaked, a conceited chick poked to descending deep throat, a losing case of chance and my partner's cheap hope that they cases disappear like some fire street coke. And even if it don't, we can make this time memorable. The devil saying stick with me forever and I make you feel invincible. Now I hear another voice that's telling me to pray hard, and the devil's only options is hell, jail, or graveyard. Feeling pressured by grown men to keep a facade and stay hard. That's that little boy inside of him that was bullied on that clay yard.
Cigarette, smoking my cancer, drink the pain away, but I still have no answer.
Miss me with the bull, keep the funny mess piling, cause all the words echoed was dummy, pest silence. When all he really wanted was honeys, respect, guidance. So all he knows now is money, sex, violence. The rich and poor die alike, and only the soul lasts. And this the words that the Lord gave me on the road to Damascus.
This much I know is true, that God bless the broken road that led me straight to you.
Welcome to this week's edition of Road to Damascus. I have a very special guest in the house. As y'all can see, I have my Houston Police Department badge on, courtesy of my brother Masood and ex-sheriff Joe Strayhorn down there. I carry this everywhere I go. But today I have my brother Gilmore, Officer Gilmore, by the way. Welcome to the show, brother. It's an honor and pleasure to have you, man.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Yes, sir. So my very first question, bro, is where are you originally from, country and state?
So I'm originally from Guatemala. I was born in Guatemala City. Both of my parents are from there, but my first memory was here. Since I came when I was a year old, I basically grew up here I grew up in Garland, Texas.
Okay.
So been in Texas my whole life. Mm-hmm.
So a fellow Texas boy growing up here locally, did you grow up with both parents in a household, and how was that?
I did, thankfully. It was good. My dad's kind of the traditional Hispanic dad who doesn't really say much, but the older I've gotten, the more I've realized how good I had it with having both parents.
Okay.
So
and
it
you
was
had
pretty
any
good.
siblings, or was it just you?
Yeah, I have two older sisters, but one's 7 years older and one's 5 years older. So we weren't that close.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I know you as one of my Christian brothers before you joined the force. So my question is now, as a full adult Christian, did you feel that it was your calling to serve others, and is that why you became a policeman, or did you want it to do something else?
No, so I grew up in the church, so Christian values have always kind of been deep down in there somewhere. And I remember being pretty young and wanting to be a police officer. But I feel like once I fully gave my life to Christ, that kind of freed me up from maybe some vices that would have kept me from becoming an officer. So it gave me the opportunity. And then, being a Christian gave me that much more motivation to want to do this career, be able to serve God and do something that I enjoy.
Okay. So does being a police officer and its policies on the force, does it sometimes interfere with being a Christian, or does it have the same morals and beliefs like one of the good guys?
I would say both, because some policies do line up pretty well with scripture and, just being that kind of God's authority here on earth and maintaining the peace. But I would say not just the policies, but sometimes the culture, police work can kind of interfere with kind of Christian values, surprisingly. officers are really, but from what I've seen, they can kind of become jaded, and it can kind of be tough to walk a pure Christian life just because you deal with so many people day in and day out, that I've seen a lot of officers kind of like cuss a lot at work and just kind of become bitter from the job even. So that has been kind of to maneuver as I got in this line of work.
Okay. And I'm reading off of paper because I want to make sure I get these questions perfect, because I had a lot of people asking me to ask you specific questions. And I said, okay, I don't want to mess it up out of respect for you as well. Because like I said, I know you as being a thorough Christian brother. So I want to make sure I get these questions correct. And now that I'm pretty sure you're aware of the stigma that most of us have in Black and brown communities, especially the low income ones, that we don't snitch, we don't talk to police, the police are out to hurt us. So my question to you is, what are the steps that you're taking to demonstrate commitment to building trust within those communities again as a police officer?
I just try to treat everybody the same. And I've always been a person who gives most people the benefit of the doubt anyways. Not stereotype, just treat everybody with the same respect and seem down to earth and not go above and beyond to kind of flex that authority, and just show them that a good example, that they can just remember like, hey, that cop was a cool cop. He wasn't rude for no reason and that sort of thing.
Okay. And my grandma, and the day is her birthday too. So I have to ask this question. Rest in peace to my grandma, Louise. But in her days of living, they policed like their own neighborhoods, right? So people respected the elders. If you did anything wrong as a kid, the whole village got on your behind. As they would say that it take a village to raise a child. So, the old school morals were like different. They were corrected by everyone. And nowadays, like I said, it's that invisible snitch code, miseducation that's taught down to like the younger generations. So do you have any do you have any ideas or any advice on how we can break that to get a different perception of the police, as well as a different perception as for us as young Black and brown men coming from the inner cities?
That's a good question, and that's a tough part, because it's so deep in the culture that it's not something you can change quickly. But I would just say, it sounds cliche, but most officers are here to help, even though it doesn't seem like it, and to just kind of remind people of that, and also remind people to look out for themselves. And most people, they don't want to snitch because they don't want to get somebody else in trouble, but they're putting their life on the line for somebody who may not even care about them. I think it's important to look out for yourself, for your family, for what's most important. But yeah, that's a good question. It's a tough issue. It's something that I don't think we can change easily, but it's definitely something we need to work on.
Yeah, and I think like we need to bridge that gap, because you're talking to an ex-felon. Somebody come from that walk of life where I used to have the mindset of, I don't want to talk to cops, I don't want to snitch. You could give me the life sentence, you could give me a death penalty, I do not talk to cops. And now as a grown man, not just as a Christian, but as a grown man with more to lose, with a family, with a wife, with children, you're not going to commit crime in front of me and expect me to go sit down for you. Because I was telling CNN News, it was me, you both Fred.
Yeah.
But
Exactly.
I joke, but that's what I try to tell the youngsters, exactly what you said. They hold this invisible snitch code
to like this old school Italian mob, and nobody even live by that code anymore. Like all those guys at the end of the day are going to turn their back on you. So there's no such thing as loyalty. Like you're trying to be loyal to something that's invisible and don't exist. And the police are here to protect and serve, and this is what we pay our tax dollars for. And I guarantee if something hits home, somebody break into your home, someone hurt one of your loved ones, you will want the police to police. So give them that same courtesy and respect. But I just think it's hard to, especially the youngsters, they're easy if you can get a hold of them. But the hard part is just getting a hold of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true.
And I also noticed, like I said, on a personal level, that you're a long distance runner. So how did you get into that?
I think it's just whenever I first started walking with the Lord, I needed something else to occupy my mind, something to fully commit to. And that was something you can do by yourself. You can just go out for a run. It gives you a goal, gives you structure. And yeah, I don't know. I think I was maybe kind of born with it a little bit, like with some natural endurance. So it just kind of gave me an avenue to push myself and see how far I can go, that sort of thing, and give me structure in the rest of my life, you know.
Because I remember we were at someone's house, I won't say their name, but at a pool party, and you guys were like playing basketball and you running, and I said, man, this dude is built like a Robocop, man. Yeah, 12 pack.
Yeah.
They say all he do is run, man. I say that's where I need to be, man, to get some of that weight off, man.
Yeah, no. Just something.
So, go ahead.
Just something to occupy my mind.
Okay. So on a personal level, back to the police training, you were given diverse training to be able to relate to people of all races and genders because everyone acts differently when it comes to something. It's even as something as simple as a traffic stop. Different people act, they have different emotions and different reactions to being stopped by police. So my question to that, were you given specific diverse training or was it an all-in-one? Like if you encounter a group of young minorities versus a group of young suburban kids.
Yeah, I would say there's more diverse training now than there's ever been because it's a hot topic. But I feel like it just comes down to a personal level because no matter who you are, we all got prejudices and you know, what do you call it? We all have stereotypes. So
right.
you can only train it so much, but at the end of the day, it comes down to you and how you treat certain people. If you're going to treat a certain type of people differently, of course, you treat every person kind of differently so you can kind of relate to them at a certain level. But yeah, just kind of getting rid of those stereotypes. And unfortunately, a lot of the times, some of the stereotypes are true. So, you know, you may end up having more issues with the type of people you get the stereotypes from. And I think just breaking that stigma of even if you are a young minority male, you know, treating the cops with respect. So that officer can be like, you know, there are young, respectful minorities out here, and I'm not going to expect, you know, them to, you know, anytime.
Okay. So from a Christian standpoint now, what would you give any advice to a young man who wants to be a police officer, but he's afraid of what someone might say? Like he has it in his heart to do the right thing, but like I said, he may have grew up in one of our communities where he feel he's going to get teased or people going to talk about him, but deep down he wants to be a police officer. What would you tell that young man?
I would say as a Christian, you already have one leg up because as a Christian, you kind of understand that not everybody's going to like you and the majority of the world is going to hate you. brothers in Christ who you can kind of and have that community and say, even if the rest of the world hates me, at least I have my family. And I would say it's kind of the same in police work, because, you know, when you put on the uniform and the badge, you know, there are a lot of people that are going to hate you just because of the badge, just because of the uniform. But you just have to accept that up front. It's like as a parent, discipline. You know, when you're a young kid, you hate parents, you hate your parents, you hate authority. But that's just the role you have to play. It's a necessary role. So just embrace it. And, you know, you are getting the people around you who do support you, and just get ready to not care and not take it personal. You know, to grow thick skin and know that they don't hate you, they hate the badge, they hate the uniform, they hate what you stand for. And there's nothing against you personally.
Okay. I also know you love your wife and children, and congratulations on having twins.
Thank you.
Funny story. I want to tell the audience, man. I met my brother and his wife, and before they got married, my brother said that he wanted to get married and have lots of children. And he got married, and they have lots of children now. So just say FYI, he saw the vision and he called it. I said, "Wow, my brother is on it." You guys have a total of 5 kids, right?
Yeah, 5 kids, full house.
Yeah, my brother called it. I said he made them babies. He said he was going to be on, man.
Yeah, yep.
And like I said, knowing you that you love your wife and children, you never even thought about another woman, because when I would ask you a question, even when she was pregnant, you would say, "Hey, I think about if the attention is going to be away from my wife because I love her and I still want her to feel loved." So to any newlywed man or any man that's been in a marriage, and let's say he cheated or he made a wrong decision, temptations coming at him from all directions, what advice would you give him to stay pure? And I'm asking you this because I can vouch for, like I said, I know you and you actually live by this code.
Yeah. So you said as a Christian man?
Yeah. What advice would you give the struggling Christian man who say, "Okay, I'm a newlywed, or I've been married and now I'm struggling with whether it's the temptation of adultery or lust or whatever," because it's usually one and the same. What advice would you give them to stay pure, to be able to maneuver the way you're doing?
I would say just remember where you were and where you came from, because a purity of celibacy with the Lord before they get their wife. And, you know, at that point, you have no wife, you have no woman, you have nothing. And you're purely devoted to God. And so now that you have a woman, it's like you almost got to remember, be prepared to have nothing, so you won't be ungrateful, if that makes any sense. Like, how do I put it? It's like you were okay with not having any woman at all because of the Lord, and now you have a woman, and then she's not enough. So you kind of got to go back to that old mindset, to where you're willing to give it all to the Lord and purely devote yourself to Him. And then now He's giving you this blessing of the wife, and you become ungrateful that not only you have a woman, but she's not enough for you. So just kind of try and stay in that gratitude mindset. Because of course, you know, you get a new car, and then a newer car passes by and it's shinier and it's nicer, and you're going to want that. But you kind of got to go back to, remember when you didn't have any car at all, you know, that sort of thing, and just buckle in and remember who you're doing it for. It's for God, most importantly. You know, you married Him first, and the wife comes second, and that will be easier.
Yes, sir. And lastly, I hope you never have to do this in Jesus' name. So I'm going to be in agreement and say this never happens, but I want to ask this question. So if you ever had to draw your weapon, do you try to talk to
whoever that perpetrator is first, or tase them or do anything before actually firing a shot. Because to my understanding, you guys have a gun and a taser, right?
Yeah.
And most incidents are like spur of the moment, and no one can say how they would truly react if they've never been in that situation, right? But my question to you, like I said, if you are to like draw your weapon or have to draw your weapon, are you thinking about uh, putting someone down, or is it more just getting the weapon out of their hand, I
Yeah, I would say all the above. You should think about all those things as much as you can. Now, obviously, there are some situations where you have no time to think, and
Right.
hopefully, you have. That's where training kicks in, and then you almost have it to where you have these certain cues where it's like weapon, face, this is how I'm gonna react. But if you have the time to sit there and speak with that person, obviously, that's the route you want to do, because they teach you want to use the least amount of force necessary to gain compliance. So, use the minimal amount of force to get that person to do what you want them to do. But unfortunately, sometimes the minimal amount of force is having to shoot that person. So yeah, it's definitely easy to watch these videos and be like, I would have done this and that. But, being in those shoes, I feel like it's different, because, your heart's pumping, everything's moving fast for yourself, and you kind of get that tunnel vision. That's why I think training is very important, because, it's important to be able to stay calm in those situations. That way you can think and reason and, find alternative solutions. And that's another, officers don't get enough training, so they overreact in these situations, and that's where we see all these bad shoots happening. Or maybe the officers are just too scared, and they react out of fear. And that's where I think maybe a relationship with God might help too, is where God has your back, so you're not acting too much out of fear in those situations. But for sure, if you can avoid something like that, definitely. But there's sometimes where you don't have time to think. Some videos I've seen where you react on this thing.
And I know I had asked this earlier, but it goes along with this question. Do you think like some of those biases and prejudices play on those fears as well? Because they may not have. So if I grew up in I don't know, in the woods in the Midwest, and I never had an interaction with a lot of inner city blacks and Hispanics, with the exception of what I see on social media or I watch on TV. And now I run across this, and I'm more scared because what's presented is a certain image. So that's where I think the diversified training will come into play, if we can break out some of our prejudice and our preconceived notions of people.
Yeah, I hope it doesn't come into play, but I'm pretty sure it does. And it's kind of been some negative on law enforcement lately, but I think it's a good thing, because it's kind of made us become super serious about this issue, and really think it through. Like, don't meet the amount of force that's coming at you. So don't fire your weapon until you clearly see a weapon. Like, wait that extra second. And unfortunately, I think in some of these cases, maybe there was some bias, maybe there was some prejudice, where this officer thought this was some sort of type of person that had a weapon, so they jumped the gun. They didn't wait that extra second to confirm the target, to confirm what they had going on. And so hopefully, all this negative light on law enforcement and all these bad shootings in the news can kind of wake up all these officers up to do their job, focus on the training, and not allow these biases to come into play and that sort of thing.
Okay. And this is truly my last question.
do you think like attitude play a part? And I'm gonna give you an example. So let's say you on a routine traffic stop and you pull me over and I'm having a bad day and I'm like, excuse my language, I'm like punk ass cop, yada yada yada, and I'm going off. Um, do you think you're more liable to give me a ticket versus you pull me over and I'm like, sir, I apologize. I was having a bad day at the office, bad day at home, and I apologize for speeding, but this was my reason for speeding. Does that change your mindset, and does that person get a ticket or not?
Yeah, I try to not let that play into it too much, but officer discretion goes a long way, and I've seen it not just with me, but with the other officers as well. If somebody's rude to them, they're gonna give you every ticket they can. It's kind of the same, kindness goes a long way.
Right.
And there's some people where, I'll pull them over and I don't even want to give them a ticket, even though it's something, I kind of got to give them a ticket for, but they're just so kind. And I'm like, this is a very respectful person. You don't want to, you kind of understand where they're coming from. So, but yeah, I've seen that. Definitely attitude plays a huge part, and it goes a long way.
And I brought that up because, like, when I say it, I always get clowned. I said every time I was rude to, and this is my young age, not in my old age. In my young age, when I was rude to a cop and I got stopped, I got a ticket or I went to jail or something happened. In my old age, I'm always respectful, always nice, and knock on wood, and I hope it stays this way by the graces of God. Like I don't get anything. Have a nice day. I understand. Because I say attitude plays a part.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate that it is that way, because I feel like it takes a very emotionally mature officer to kind of be above that.
Right.
He is being rude to the officer, but he doesn't have his ego on his shoulder like the rest of these officers do. And he's still respectful, and he still gives that person a warning. Now that person's going to be like, man, I was rude to this guy, and he was still cool with me. They kind of start feeling bad. And I think that will go further than them just playing back and forth like it normally goes.
Right. But I believe in like authority now, right? And that's another thing I try to tell my youngsters. So I'm like, you should always be respectful whether the cop gives you a ticket or not, because he has the answer to God. So if you respect the people that's in authority, then they either gonna get in line or God gonna make them get in line, because that's how authority works. So that's my mindset now. But you're absolutely correct, brother.
Yeah. Ultimately, God will take care of it. Whoever's in the wrong, God. And you should let him take care of it. Even if you're the passenger and the cops be rude to you, be respectful, and you know that God's gonna punish that officer. Yeah.
Is there anything else you would like the audience to know before we head out? Because I want, like I said, I want them to highlight, because I know you on a personal level, and before you were a police officer, you were like one of the nicest guys I ever met. And this is not a facade. Like, you really, everything I'm saying is like you really are, bro. I know how you love your wife, how you love your children, how you protective of your friends, how you take care of everything, and you walk accordingly. So I want them to know this is you. But before you put on a badge, this is you as a person, as a God-fearing man. So is there anything else you would like them to know about you or the job or what it details, or even being a Christian?
Yeah, I would just like to say that I haven't been an officer that long, so take everything I say with a grain of salt. Maybe my mind might change in 10 years. Hopefully not so much, because they say, this job is going to change you. And I've always been like, hopefully not for the worse, and hopefully not too much. I want to stay true to who I know I am. So I haven't been an officer that long. I'm going a year now, about a year in the academy. So take everything I said with maybe a grain of salt. That's just what I've seen, myself from being around other officers. And also, yeah, I'm not perfect either. It's definitely been hard. I'm sure you may understand this, that after you get married, you get a whole new set of problems.
Right.
Becoming an officer, You think that I would say, yeah, it is. There is a difference, and you can kind of see where some of these officers are coming from. You know, you feel different when you put on that uniform and you have a little bit of power. I can see how it may get to some people's head, and that's why we see all these bad cops around here, because the power gets to them. So I can see that, but of course, I always try and stay, true to who I know God wants me to be, and be that person. So I would say it's not easy. Like I was talking about earlier, a lot of officers become jaded. They become almost like, the people they deal with, just from time on the job. So I would say that's been a struggle, but just stay pure and devoted to who God wants you to be, and let that be your ground rock. That's something that I try to do every day. I'm not perfect, but we're here for the long run.
Okay. I thank you, brother. That's a wrap for the day, man. I really, really appreciate it, brother. You answered a lot of questions, and you answered them truthfully. So, like I said, I can attest this is who you are as a person. So I thank you for being a part of Road to Damascus. Hopefully this is not the last time, but but thank you, brother.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate what you do and for having me on. And yeah, anytime
Yes,
you
sir.
can set this up again.
Yes, sir. Thank
We
you,
appreciate
brother.
it.